everyone. Today we are going to talk about outlining. Now outlining can be very difficult for this class or confusing because it's a little bit different than what you may have learned in the past. So what I decided to do was kind of break it down. And so I'm going to present this as though I was giving a speech on outlining, but actually go through the steps so that you can see by my example that's written on this board how you will format your outline. So to start off with, you're going to include a title for your outline. The title will correlate with whatever you're going to speak on for that day, but it's never actually said during your speech. So, for example for this, I would never start out my speech saying outlining basics. You will understand that my speech is going to be about that, but I would never state my actual title. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to tell you your title will be at the top of your page, and my title is Outlining Basics. Next, you're going to break it down into your introduction, your body, and conclusion, which is very similar to many other classes. So to start out, you'll put introduction, and you'll write it out completely. And then your Roman numeral 1 is going to begin your introduction. Your introduction is going to begin with an attention material. I don't have that written on here because for space sake, I don't have enough room. But your introduction is not only going to include your attention material, because after you gain your audience's attention by saying a statistic, a fact, or an interesting item, then you're going to go in, you're going to give relevance to the audience, why it is important for them to know about this topic. Then you're going to give some sort of credibility statement for your introductory speech, which is about yourself. You're credible to speak about yourself because you are who you are. Whereas when you give your informative speech, it's going to be a little different because you've done research, or maybe you have a real life situation that makes you credible to speak on that topic. Then you'll also go in and you'll talk about your thesis, which is your central idea, or what your whole entire speech is essentially about. You'll also then go into a preview, and your preview is going to talk about the 3 main points that you'll be talking about today. So, the 3 main points that I will talk about today are my objectives, the main points of a speech, and then common errors in outlining. So, to begin with, I'm going to talk about your objectives. At the top of your speech, up above your title, you are going to include objectives. And in your textbook, it specifically shows what your objectives are, but it's also helpful. You've purchased a course supplement, which is about maybe a 30-page little book, and I should show that to you in another video that I create. But there's a sample outline in that book, but there's also sample outlines in your text and under resources. And it's very, very important that you follow the specific guidelines that your professor sets out, because each professor wants you to do it in a little bit different format. So, your objectives are mainly your specific purpose, which is to inform, to persuade, and then it ends with the sentence, to persuade my audience that my way of outlining is the best way of outlining. Now that might not be a very good specific purpose, but for the sake of an example, we'll use that. Then your central idea will, of course, be your main point. There's also other deviations that you could use, but if you have questions on those, you can just let me know or ask me those. So now, in between each of your main points, you're also going to include a transition, and this will be written out in your outline. It'll be in parentheses between each point. So, I have included it in green so that you can see where it would go. It won't have a Roman numeral in front of it. It will simply be in parentheses. So your transition could simply be, now that I have talked about objectives, now I'm going to talk to you about the main points of your speech. Hopefully that'll make sense to you. You can format that in many, many different ways, but that's probably the simplest way that you can do it. You can say, first I'll talk about this, next I'll talk about this, and so on. So then your main points. Something to remember about your main points is that they should always be in full sentences. Fragments are not good because it's not easy to follow. It should be simply written like an actual paper, just with the breakdown of the Roman numerals and further breakdown. So please remember that. Always put complete sentences, check for grammatical mistakes because it just doesn't look as professional. Next, you always want to provide support material to your main points. So your main point is a full sentence. For example, mine would be, main points are an essential part of speaking. or outlining. So then my support material would be, when you are giving your main points, you want to provide examples, which could be a support material, statistics, or other information. So that would be what you would possibly research. Now that I've talked to you about the main points, I'm going to transition and talk to you about common errors. Now, everybody has things that they're good at and things that they're not good at. But I will tell you that outlining, the biggest mistake tends to be that you do not include support material. You might just have your main points, and you do not include them in full sentences. So just please, please, please make full sentences. The next thing is, if you've broken down your material for, I'll show you this for Roman numeral 3, if you have an A, you must also have a B. You cannot divide something into one. It has to be divided into 2 or 3 or so on. So just please remember that. If you have an A, you must have a B. Then I would say the next biggest error is simply leaving out the transitions because you might not think about it. And also, I'm trying to think of anything else that really stands out, and right now it doesn't, but I might draw it to your attention when you send me your outlines. I'll be like, hey, how about you think about this next time when you're writing your speech. So finally, you're going to go into your conclusion. And your conclusion is basically you're going to summarize what you've just talked about, and you're going to provide some kind of memorable closure or a clincher, something to really leave your audience with one last thought. It could be a quote, it could be a statistic, it could be one last, I just really want you to remember this, if you remember nothing else from my speech. So for my memorable closure, I'm going to tell you, just please, please, please use the resources that are available to you for outlining, because it can be difficult, and we want you to get the best grades possible, because we want you to format your ideas so that they're logical and so that you know what you're going to talk about, because outlining is truly preparation for your speech. And if you have a good outline, you'll give a better speech. So if you have any questions on outlining, or if this was confusing to you at all, please let me know, and I'll try a different format to explain this material to you. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you very much.